My name is Mireille Widmer. I am a PhD researcher, as you said, at the Institute of Development Studies, which is housed at the University of Sussex in the UK. I want to thank very much Martin Chautari for the opportunity to present this research to you today, and thank all of you for coming, because I understand that today is actually a public holiday and that traffic was quite bad in some sectors of the city. So thank you for the effort. I value you being here. I'm going to stand actually to present. Sorry. So our research, and I introduced also my local co-researcher, Bibha, Karna, of course. So our research is about urban security governance. Now, why would you research urban security governance at all? Well, the first reason is that this is the urban age. We have now more than half of the world's population that lives in cities, and this share is constantly growing. And so I consider that actually cities are a very interesting unit of governance to study at the moment. They become increasingly relevant also in the policy world. Why security? Well, again, from my perspective, security is actually the bedrock of inclusive development. You cannot have development without a matter of security. And I've worked on this, on peace and security issues all my career to date. And why Nepal? Well, you know that better than me. One reason is because the urban transition is in full swing in this country, particularly here in the Kathmandu Valley and in the Chautari. And the other reason is, of course, federalism and the opportunity that we have to observe a change in governance structures. So this is what brought me here with this research question, which I formulate here in plain English, because, of course, in a PhD thesis, you have to add a lot of obscure language to make it sound much more sophisticated. Basically, what I am doing through my research is mapping the urban security network. So mapping all the actors that are involved either in the provision of security or its governance. And then once I've drawn all this network, I want to see where the municipality stands in the middle of this and how the municipality is able to influence the system. And this, of course, is the policy-relevant aspect of my research. And then we're going to take this one step further to hone down to the individual level and see if men and women actually approach security differently. Because, of course, since the local election in 2017, there's a host of women who have now entered local government. And are they going to do something different about security governance? That's the research question. The way we have set out to answer it is very much through a bottom-up design. So we are not starting from the institutional level, looking at what the laws say about how security should be governed. We decided to start very much at the neighborhood level to see how security is provided in practice and learn from there. So we started off last November, December, Bibha and I started working together on a mapping survey of every one of Janakpur's 25 wards. In every ward, we carried out an interview with the ward chair and with one of the 2 women representatives. And the purpose was to basically understand where we were setting our feet in, understand the broad socioeconomic characteristics of these different neighborhoods, the governance structure, but also understand who provides security and what is the general feeling of security in all these wards. This was our starting point for then a round of qualitative interviews to flesh out the system that we started discerning. Interviews with different tiers of government, from ward to municipal to the provincial government. With security forces, we started with the chief district officer to hone down to the SP and police stations. Non-state actors, and we'll talk a little bit about the youth clubs that we interviewed, and the private sector as well, to get as many perspectives as possible on this system. What we are now doing, and unfortunately data collection is not quite complete yet, is to really hone down on the gender component of the research through focus group discussions. We've only run 2 so far of the 6 that we were planning to run, but I will present today also a little bit of the very preliminary findings at this level. But let's dive straight into it, and I will pass the floor to my colleague Bibha so that she walks you through some of the results from the mapping survey.
Good afternoon, all of you. I am Bibha Karna. Janakpur sub-metropolitan is taken as the case study for the research. As you can see, this is a recent map of Janakpur. Janakpur had 16 wards before, but now it is extended to 25 prior election, local election in 2017. You can see that the green area, the green wards represent the rural wards, which is included now in the Janakpur sub-metropolitan. These rural wards has least dense population to the red one, which has the most dense areas, the urban heart of the Janakpur. They are the urban areas. Now, as Mireille said, that we have conducted 2 interviews, including in every ward, one ward chair and a women representative. We asked them how do they feel in the matter of security in their ward, and all of them, most of them said that they feel rather safe. But the 2 ward chairs of ward number 21 and ward number 4, they said that they feel rather unsafe, respective to the other wards. Similarly, we asked one more question regarding the security. How do they feel in terms of security in the upcoming 5 years? What is their hypothesis about the security level in the upcoming 5 years? And most of them said that they feel better. It will be similar. It will be safer. A little bit there is a problem with this color contrast. The green area said that they feel it will be better, and yellow will be the same. But the red one is the for ward number 4, where the ward chair said that if the similar security system continues, then within 5 years the security level will deteriorate. The security will deteriorate in the ward. Well, in the interview with the ward chair, it's a wonderful finding. We have here the security concerns. We interviewed what are the security concerns related to the gender perspective of men and women. And all the ward chair we have interviewed, they all are men. So the blue one, which represents the security concerns of men, ward chiefs, whereas the red one are the answers, security concerns, as it is reported by the women representative. And surprisingly, women representative has taken unemployment, poverty, foreign employment as one of the major security issues, major security concern, whereas the men or the ward chairs, they have taken drug addiction as one of the major security concern in Janakpur. And this toilet and open defecation was the security concern for the women representative too, whereas male, they never spoke it as a concern of security. So when we summarize the security concerns related to men and the women, we found that actually the security concerns differ in the perspective of men and women in Janakpur. Definitely, Janakpur is a growing city, and we found these are some of the peri-urban areas. These are some of the peri-urban areas in Janakpur, in which urban growth is been witnessed clearly. It is visualized apparently. The open lands, it has been converted into newly constructed concrete buildings. So it is a challenge for the municipality, for the at the security level also, and to provide municipal provisions in the towns. Next bit now, we are going to, next bit is based on the qualitative interview to know more about the security provisions in Janakpur. Nepal Police as a security provider appeared prominently providing security to the to Janakpur city, Janakpur municipality. There are 6 area police stations in Janakpur. But all these police precincts do not follow the ward boundaries. It means that there are several wards which are looked after by many of the police stations. Now the problem is when some incident or when some crime occurs in any point of some ward, it becomes a problem for the ward chair to call what police stations. They have to map out at what point of my ward the incident has taken place and who is supposed to take over the case. So it is a bit of a matter of concern there. Now, the people of Janakpur has recently witnessed a very bad experience at the time of Madhesh Andolan with Nepal Police. But nowadays people call more for police foot patrolling, and it is a good sign that they feel safety when they see Nepal Police there. In APF is also, of course, it is a security provider. But as we are focusing mainly inside the municipal boundary, APF is working. APF is only providing as a backup to Nepal Police, but not apparently providing security as a foot patrol like Nepal Police. But some at the time of emergency, like a strike or Andolan, of course, it is there. Municipal police, at security level, they are very less in numbers. 17 municipal officers are there, including 1 woman. Basically, these municipal police are seen in urban areas, at the heart of main areas of Janakpur. Their main focus is to secure, clear up the roads, footpath, and carry out the decisions made by the Judicial Committee. Of course, to obstruct the or to look at the illicit construction is going over somewhere. So these are some of the works which municipal police carries out, but yet they are not in the big number, even though the municipality is expanded to all the 25 wards. Private security companies are not much of flourishing stage in Janakpur. There are only 2 or 3 private companies which is hired by some of the factories or some of the banks, but it is not too much seen in almost every corner of Janakpur. We can see them in some of the public places like Janakpur or hospital is there, some schools, and in the banks. This security guard's main focus is to give security to the private property rather than the personal safety. Now, night watchman is one of the important that we have attracted our attention. Night watchman is also providing security there. Basically, it is night watchman is hired by Silver and Gold Association to just give patrolling at night, just to patrol at night, guard dozens of gold and silver shops in Sonarpatti. And prominently, while conducting the mapping survey in our first phase, youth clubs and service committees appeared to us, and we were so much impressed by the result that we want to know that on what ground this service committee and youth clubs works for. This service committee, there are hundreds of service committee and the youth club in Janakpur. Now they are independent, they are caste based, their activities are religious, cultural. Smallest one has only 25 members, but the largest have even 300 members in their organization. Yet we were interested whether they are working on security issues of the city or not. And surprisingly, we found that they are, of course, working on dispute resolution and crowd control management. This youth club, they can even mobilize up to 4,000 of volunteers in the big festivals like Dasai. Ward Chief and Judicial Committee we have taken here as the security provider. Judicial Committee, as it is, looks after the cases which is cases like disputes which is forwarded by ward chair and from the different ward. Even though people feel safe to go immediately to the Judicial Committee to seek decision or to have the settlement of the disputes. So it is appearing as the one of the security provider, but most of the cases in Judicial Committee is related to the road extension. Now, watcher has also come as the security provider, in the sense we have taken here as watcher as a security provider, as it is watchers are very effectively contributing to settle down the disputes at the ward level. Now, it depends upon, it also varies differently to the watcher and from this ward to another ward. It depends upon the political experience of the watchers too, and the access to the police stations nearby. Now, it's not that everyone is there, but maximum of the watchers are contributing themselves to the settle down of the disputes. And we had, when we are, this is a summary of the security provider in Janakpur. We have listed vertically all the security providers there, and then we identified that not all the security provider deal with the similar type of security functions, deal with the similar type of security issues. So we have categorized into different security functions. They are surveillance and patrol, crime investigation, rule enforcement, crowd control, and dispute resolution. These are the findings. They do not cover almost all of the security functions. So when we have planned it like this, then the result was like this. This was the result. Nepal Police appeared prominently dealing with all type of security functions. Ward Chief and Nepal Police work for the, similarly they work for the, dispute resolution. They are contributing similarly for the dispute resolution, Nepal Police and the Ward. Importantly, youth club are very contributing in maximum way to the crowd management. And the interesting point is that at the crowd management, youth clubs are the first one to lead, but Nepal Police comes as the backup at the time of festivals and the religious events. But the scene is just opposite when it is the time of political event. For example, VIP visit. Nepal Police is the first and youth club is working as the backup today. Thank you for listening to me. Now Mireille will continue and she will explain how the system of governance works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bibha. So what we've seen so far is who are all the security providers across Janakpur. Now, how are they governed? Well, to begin answering that question, I will actually take you back to the last table that Bibha has shown you. Because what we found interesting is that you can call these policing coalitions on these different security functions. Now, each of these coalitions actually functions a little bit differently. At the one end, you perhaps have crime investigation, which comes clearly as a responsibility of the Nepal Police. And if other actors are involved, it's only to provide information as part of the Nepal Police investigations. At the other end of the spectrum, I would put dispute resolution, where here you have several forums that people access based on accessibility, convenience, whatever contact they have. There's a fair bit of forum shopping actually going on at this level. The only degree of specialization we found is what Bibha said when it comes to the Judicial Committee, because they deal with a majority of cases to do with land and building, construction, and now the road expansion in Janakpur. Then Bibha already spoke about the dynamics when it comes to crowd control and this steering model, steered either by the Nepal Police if the events have got more of a political overtone, or by the youth clubs when it's about religious and cultural events. And that leaves us with two important security functions, that of surveillance and patrols and that of rule enforcement. And I would argue that in this case, actually, we deal with a system that is functional, but that is fairly disconnected. And to look at this more closely, I'll present a different way of looking at the data. What you have here, if you look at the column and the row, you'll see exactly the same security providers. So this is a double entry table, and if you look at it dynamically, the lower half is actually a mirror image of the upper half. When the cells are shaded in blue is that when we consider that actually the security forces take the lead on coordination. The purple cells is when we consider that government is taking the lead, and orange is when it's non-state actors. In this instance, it's the youth clubs. What is striking here, of course, is the amount of cells that are shaded in gray, where we see either little or no coordination. Now, in many of these cases, it's not a problem because these actors actually perform slightly different security functions. But you could imagine that at some point you could strengthen this urban security network by, for example, looking at coordination between the Nepal Police and the municipal police once the municipal police starts growing. Or with the private security, we have very little evidence of coordination in really, Bibha mentioned Janakpur, so this urban central area where the gold market is, there is a little bit of exchanges, but it's very limited. So this is about the bilateral coordination. Then of course there are also formal coordination mechanisms that exist at district and at provincial level. These bring together the state security forces. What was striking to me is that there is no such mechanism that exists at the municipal level. At the board level neither, but you can understand that the scale is small enough that informal might suffice at this level. And the other striking thing is that the mayor is not participating either in the district or the provincial security coordination mechanism. So the reading that you can have of this is of a system that has got fairly good horizontal coordination, but where the vertical flow of information between tiers of governments on these security matters is perhaps a little bit lacking. Where the vertical communication happens is within the state security forces, of course. So it becomes very important that these are connected to the governance level. And what I found, and I'm going a little bit on a limb here, because of course it's hard for an external researcher to observe this, but the hunch that I have is that the coordination here is strongest at the district level, where you have this strong two-way communication through the chief district officer. We found relatively good exchanges of information and communication at the ward level, from the ward chief to the local police stations, and then the information flow as well at the provincial level. But strikingly little communication that we hear of at the municipal level. Now this is about coordination. Coordination information flows is one thing. If we talk about governance, we talk about another level of coordination, which becomes about also regulation, command and control. To examine this further, I suggest disaggregating governance into different levels of command and control. You have the red zone, which would be the strongest institutional control. Then you have a yellow zone that is perhaps more informal influence on some of the strategies. And then you have this green level, which would be more intermediation in particular cases. Now, if I was to plot all the actors involved in security governance on this chart, I'm going to simplify a situation that is obviously more complex, but it would look something like this, where you have the state security forces clearly in the red zone with very strong control. Then we put the mayor and the deputy mayor a little bit on the edge. The fact that they are a little bit red as well is just to illustrate the municipal police, which they control directly. The ward chair then come a little bit sitting across these two areas. The private sector, I put them here as well because we found very interesting cases of public-private partnership where the private sector is actually funding some police infrastructure. For example, a police beat somewhere, like a checkpost somewhere. But this de facto would also influence where then the police is stationed within the municipality. Then you have other prominent local policemen, businessmen. At the moment, I put the provincial government outside of this because my feeling is that as of today in Janakpur, there is a lot of legislative activity going on, but it hasn't yet translated into an actual impact on how security is governed at the municipal level. Why does it matter who governs security? Well, I think it matters because actually different actors may have slightly different priorities. And I've used in my theoretical framework this study by Bibha and Kirk, which distinguish a bottom-up concern for physical safety and security and more of a top-down concern for social order. I would add this third dimension, which is the protection of private property. Now, of course, in an ideal world, you satisfy all three. We all need all three. But the fact is that if trade-offs have to be made, different actors will make slightly different calculations, and this is why I would argue it is important to consider who is governing security. So what about the municipality in all of this? Well, when we speak with the municipality, frankly, they say security is not really our business. It's the role of the Nepal Police and of others. Like, this is not directly our concern. So to look at this further, I went back to the literature. And I will present what the municipality in Janakpur is currently doing compared to what other municipalities around the world are doing to govern security. And basically they have three groups of actors that they can work with, which we've already explored. One is the state security forces. Second come the municipal agents. And third is harnessing community resources. So working with the state security forces, what you see in Janakpur is this third level. So very clearly, and the mayor says it, the mayor is an intermediary between the police and the citizens, which is a very useful, valuable role. What you don't see in Janakpur, but you see in some other countries, is more formal contractual arrangements for security provision between the municipality and the state police. So that's the first group of actors. The second group of actors is municipal staff. Now here again, the Nepal constitution provides now for the possibility of municipalities to set up town police, Nagar Prahari, and in fact in Janakpur a municipal police has existed for decades. They're only now revising the legal framework, but in Janakpur, as in other cities, this is something that has happened for a long time. I will talk a little bit more about what the municipal police can do, which is an important point here. But there are other options, and maybe one I would like to draw your attention to is the partnerships with the private security provider, because I'm from Switzerland and this is something that I know in my own city, where for some tasks actually the municipality works through private security agencies. Why? Because it's cheaper. You have to invest a lot of resources in training a police officer. And so for some tasks of static surveillance, some municipalities choose to actually contract private security company. We have not observed this in Janakpur. And thirdly, it's this harnessing of community resources, which you also see, and sometimes it's really enshrined in the legal framework in some of these cities. In fact, in Janakpur, if you look at the history of the youth clubs, some of them after the Jana Andolan started off a little bit like this. But it's not something that we observe at the moment either. Are there some resources that the municipality could tap into to better provide security? I think it would be interesting to consider that. I said I would talk a little bit more about possible roles for the municipal police because I thought that would be useful. So actually I quickly went back to the literature, read a lot of articles on municipal policing across the world and tried to summarize all the findings into this table, where you see different levels of policing that the municipal police can perform. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but my sense is that the Nepal constitution would not allow the municipal police to be involved in criminal justice. So this is not really an option here. Where I would perhaps see a gap at the moment in urban security provision is here, is the policing of antisocial behavior. So it's kind of like, we're not talking about crime here, but we're talking about uses of public space that make some parts of the population feel unsafe. And for example, it's the young men that hang out around the water reservoirs, around the ponds in Janakpur, and perhaps they drink alcohol, perhaps they take drugs, they make people feel uncomfortable, perhaps they even tease girls that walk past. This is what leads people in the different wards to call for more police patrols. There seems to be a little bit of a gap at this stage, and I'm just thinking that maybe this is something that would be interesting for municipal police to consider as well. Love this slide. So this is when we start talking about gender and security. These are 24 portraits of the wonderful women who currently sit on Janakpur's ward committees, which we interviewed, as we said at the very beginning, through the mapping survey. And we're now going back to them through focus group discussions to understand whether men and women actually approach security differently. So as I say, this phase of the data collection is not over yet. And actually in a few days, Bibha and I are going back to Janakpur to continue these focus group discussions. So please, the next 3 slides are very like our working hypothesis. They're not yet findings, but I wanted to offer something here anyway. What we're doing is basically running 6 focus group discussions, 2 with only women, 2 with only men, and 2 mixed men and women, so that we can also observe how they interact. But so far, we've only conducted 1 focus group with women representatives and 1 focus group with men. The first thing we're attentive to is whether you can really say that women are a homogeneous category, or how diverse women are. Now, what we observed, again, in this single focus group, so we'll have to verify this, is that actually, then the other thing that we're looking at is evidently whether gender changes something, not just to security, as Bibha already said, but also to the way you govern security. And what we found in these two focus group discussions is similar, confirms what we had already found through the mapping survey. The first issue that women representatives mention are women or children-related issues, child marriage, domestic violence. What was interesting is that from there, they immediately jumped into a discussion of the root causes and the broader factors around this. So there was a systemic thinking that immediately started working with a strong concern for prevention, essentially. The men was different there. The issue that they started talking about was drug addiction. Again, this confirms what we had found through the mapping survey. And when we asked about approaches, they considered that they needed more manpower to be able to approach these youth in the streets and maybe approach their families. So it was a little bit of a different approach that they suggested. Both emphasized the need for closer partnership with the police, which is something that they really called for. Interestingly, both also see a role for the local governments in tackling security, which comes a little bit in contrast to what the municipality had told us. And lastly, and here I'm moving a little bit away from security issues per se, but we also wanted to understand what are the barriers to participation of the women and men on the board committee, because if the women do have special interest and special resources to bring to the table when discussing security, then they should be able to discuss in general as well. And very preliminary, I keep saying it, in the column headings is the kind of obstacles to participation that you find in the literature. And we're just trying to now verify if these appear also in practice. Two findings that I would like to draw your attention to. The first one is that yes, women do feel disempowered, but male committee members also feel disempowered. So yes, there are patriarchal norms at play, and there is a gender dynamic at play, but there's something also broader, because the men members of the board committees also have the same feeling. And the other thing that I was struck by is that at the moment when we asked about their roles, actually this one, what the women say that they do is that they're constantly called to settle local disputes. But so effectively it means that at the moment they work as social workers more than elected representatives. And perhaps a little bit similarly, the men are constantly called to act as go-between between particular residents of the wards and the authorities. But perhaps in time, when the system settles, the role of these ward representatives could be expanded to something that is more oriented towards policy and projects. I'm going to stop here. If I had to summarize the research, I would say that my finding is that the security system in Janakpur works, but that there are points of fragility. On the one hand, related to urban growth that is very fast, and on the other hand, related to this somewhat disconnectedness between some of these actors. But also, and perhaps on a more positive note, I think there are a lot of untapped resources for security provision and governance, whether we're talking about the women, whether we're talking about the youth clubs. So it would be interesting to see how these resources could also be harnessed. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mireille.